Welcome back to the Chasing Common Ground podcast. And today I am joined by Justin McClintock. Did I get your last name right?
You nailed it first try.
Awesome. That's always a good feeling. So this episode is unique. I had the opportunity, I was doing some dog walking last week. So I was listening to some of your solo episodes and I liked some of the experiences that you shared. I found that coaches doing that just kind of makes it easier to kind of like seek out help that we need, or even just feel like maybe we're not the only one going through the things that we go through. So it'll be exciting to get to know you. But first and foremost, just for anybody in my audience who has never heard of you before, how would you describe yourself?
I'm Justin McClintock. My company is Feel Strong Fitness. Everything we do is custom individual fitness solutions for motivated people who have had really big setbacks. That tends to look like people dealing with chronic pain or coming back from an injury, a lot of post-physical therapy people. Also, we found busy moms and busy professionals fit in this same category. People are having a hard time finding the right way to fit fitness in their life and then finding exactly the right combination of things to get them where they want to go.
That is so concise. And naturally, I'm going to dig a bit deeper. I want to know what was your intro into the fitness industry? Because you alluded to some of your background beforehand. So I want to kind of get the bigger picture. Not necessarily, you don't have to give like a big, long, lengthy origin story, but
Mhm.
just kind of what was the spark that kind of made things happen?
It was CrossFit. I started in CrossFit. I started as a member, fell in love with it. It changed my life. Started part-time coaching. I think I was like coaching for membership very early on, as is kind of the way at some of these group fitness gyms. And the more I coached, the more I loved it. Went full time, and really found that what really lit my fire and got me interested was working with individuals, even in a group setting when I could take 2 minutes and find a solution for someone and learn about them and really tailor something that helped them.
Hmm.
That's what really excited me. And honestly, that's where I felt I was doing the most good. So I kind of gradually shifted from all group work to smaller groups. I ran a powerlifting club, an Olympic weightlifting club, a gymnastics club, things like that, smaller and smaller groups. And then it became obvious that what I really wanted to do was just do one-on-one and really specific tailored one-on-one. So it was that kind of journey over, I don't know, 15 years.
Love it. Can you recall like a specific individual that sort of like inspired you to keep moving the needle within diving deeper and deeper into fitness?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a bunch of them. One who jumps out is actually a current client. I'm going to call her Jess just to obfuscate slightly, but she came to join CrossFit. She's like, I need to get in shape. I just need to move a little bit. And I was in charge of doing like the intro sessions. There was like a 5-pack intro session to kind of teach people movements, see how they did. And as we were doing it, it became obvious to me she didn't belong in CrossFit, which put me in a slightly challenging situation because my job was to put her in CrossFit. So what I did was did the best kind of coaching I could. At the end of it, she looked at me and said, "Can we just work together?" Yes, we can. Make sure you tell my boss that I didn't try and force this on you. But yes, absolutely, we can. And she went from someone who was not great at getting down and sitting up out of a chair. Stairs were often a problem. She would avoid stairs all the time. Certainly wasn't going for walks and being active. And kind of like her life had become a little bit small. Like she wasn't a shut-in, but there were lots of things she couldn't do. And now we have greatly expanded that bubble. And there's all kinds of things she can do and say yes to, which she wanted to say yes to previously, but it felt limited and she had all pretty much accepted that, well, I'm not a person who can do those things anymore because I'm this years old and I've had these injuries and I've had these surgeries and there's nothing else I can do. And taking her through that change and she's continuing to progress and continuing to change. I find that individual really inspiring, and that's kind of like the ethos that Feel Strong operates under.
Hmm. To dig deeper into that, can you think of a time in your own life when you related to that individual, like at the peak? Like maybe you didn't relate to them in all ways, but a time in your life when you had the most relatability to them, just within your own experiences.
Yeah, 100%. I had hurt my shoulder, I think doing a gymnastics thing, like a traumatic injury. and it just never got better. And I never really dealt with it. I just kind of worked around it. Even when I had significant education around pain and tendons and things like that, I didn't put myself through a program. It's like, it's fine, it's fine. And it went from doing pretty advanced calisthenics and gymnastics things to not only can I not hang from a bar, I can't put anything overhead. I'm avoiding putting things away in shelves in my own house. And the breaking point was when I was putting on a coat one winter morning and it hurt so much that I actually screamed and woke my poor wife up. And then I had to take a step back and go, "Oh, I was doing, strict muscle ups 9 months ago, and now I can't put my coat on. Maybe it's time to take this seriously. I probably should have taken this seriously 7 months ago." And the rebuilding process out of that was about a year before I could get back to like full capability. And that the avoidance and denial and frustration and finally the vulnerability and transparency to have to go to a colleague, a coach who I knew. I was like, "I think you know all the things I do, but I need another set of eyes. I'm going to hire you full price. Please make me a client. I need this shoulder to work. Like this is unacceptable at this age." And to just be a client and do the boring, non-sexy stuff and believe in the process and then watch it work, watch it work, watch it work and take it to the end point. I think about that whole process a lot because it ended up being almost 2 years of frustration over not addressing something that could have been addressed and didn't have to become such a big deal.
And I think that was a big bulk of what the solo episode that I tuned into was
Okay.
about. And it just, for me, it was top of mind because like I'll have all kinds of conversations with all kinds of people in the fitness industry, outside of the fitness industry. And a lot of the time they'll come across this like similar situation where like they have an injury that kind of makes them feel like they couldn't do what they could have easily done months prior, or it's just like some of the things that live rent free in people's head is the things that are inevitable, like aging is inevitable.
Hmm.
Like are we are not going to have the same work capacity at 80 years old that we had at 20 years old, and there's nothing we can do about it. Granted, technology and education can help us, but like with what we know now, these things are changing. Like life is changing whether we want it to or not. Time goes by quickly whether we want it to or not. And by hearing kind of that insight from your own like self-discovery, I felt that that was helpful not only for general population clients, but also for all of our peers, myself, anybody in the industry who may be like at a crossroads or they're like, wow, like I am not invincible. Like, despite the fact that I can dive down rabbit holes and learn all these things, like I still need other people to be part of my journey. And I still need to take however long it takes to get the recovery. Like from my point of view, there's a lot of people similar to me who dove into jujitsu. And the great thing about jujitsu is it reveals a lot of your like weak areas, or it can exacerbate injuries that may have been mild before, but they become very major if like your mobility is lacking, or if your core strength could be better, or even just like posture related. Like all these things just get highlighted in the sport of jujitsu. And in order to like remedy that, like I'll give you a few examples. Like Jordan Syed has been doing a lot of mobility, and over the course of I think like a year, 2 years, he has made progress with like his splits. He's made progress
Hmm.
with his toe touches and stuff. Another good friend of mine, Dean Guido, has also been doing similar programming, and he has made progress. And the cool thing with him is that like I worked with him in person at a gym, so I got to see all the crazy, wild things that he was trying back then, and I can see the outcomes that he has with the different things that he's trying now. And like to be able to witness a person's quality of life transform, because sometimes we're doing everything that we think we should be doing, and the outcome might not be what we wanted it to be. And then when people are doing everything that they should be doing and the outcome is what they want it to be, and you know how much patience and adversity they had to face to get to that point, like there's something gratifying about being in the sidelines of somebody's life and being like, I know how good that feels. And for anybody else, it's just like a drop in the bucket. But like to be able to understand how much less pain a person could be in from
Yep.
improving some subtle aspect to their life. But at the same time, if we don't put these things on the platform, then there's a lot of people out there that are thinking, oh, it's just me. Like I'm just broken or I'm just lazy or I'm just this or that, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
Um,
and
Go
breaking
ahead.
those beliefs is a really important part of the work that I do, and I think an important thing like in fitness and health, right? There's nothing we can do about aging. We are
Hmm.
going to get older. And something you said earlier, your capacity will be lower at 80 than it will be at 20. Yeah, 100%. That doesn't mean that you need to be housebound or you can't do activities you like to do, or it doesn't mean you can't be incredibly strong for an 80-year-old. It doesn't mean you can't be incredibly active for an 80-year-old. And people conflate those things.
Hmm.
It's well, I'm getting older. That has to mean that I live in pain or I can't do all the things I want to do and things like that. And maybe the answer is yes. If your favorite thing is to squat 500 pounds, at some point you won't be able to do that. But if your favorite thing is to squat at the absolute maximum of your capabilities, your flexibility, your mobility, your strength, and potentially depending on when you started training, I work with people all the time who started in their 40s and 50s. Like, yeah, you can get stronger than you've ever been at 50 years old if we never started doing progressive overload until you were 50 years old. Like you can get newbie gains at 50, 51, which is a cool trick. And so breaking those beliefs and as well as highlighting something you said earlier, making sure that what we're doing is actually pointed to what your goal is. There's a lot of people like doing exercise and movement and doing like the things they think they should be doing. And of course, anything is better than nothing. If you are moving with intention 3 or 4 times a week, high five, you're already ahead of 85% of people at least. But if your goal is to be able to keep playing pickleball and all of your stuff and you're just doing, bilateral bench pressing twice a week, is it hurting? No. Is it moving you in that direction? Maybe not. Maybe we're strong enough at bench press and we need to work on some mobility and rotation and lateral shuffling and that kind of stuff to make sure we're actually taking you where you want to go. Whenever someone comes to me and they're like, well, I want to be strong and I want to be in shape, like, we have a 45-minute conversation ahead of us. Cool. Let's dig into it. Like, what the hell does that mean? What do you want to be able to do when 10 weeks from now, when you're like, wow, we've been so successful, you'll be able to say that because what happened? What's the thing that you're going to be like, well, this is success, which
Hmm.
also keeps me honest. Because if, 10 weeks, and 10 weeks is a slightly arbitrary number, it's just a time that, enough time to get something accomplished. If we get there and we're like, all right, so we said in 10 weeks, we feel like we want to be able to do this and we haven't done it, something's wrong. Let's hard time out. It's probably my fault. Let's figure out why this isn't working. Because even if it's fun and even if you're progressing and even if you're getting stronger on paper, if we haven't done the thing we set out to do, for me, that's not enough. And we need to retool, rejigger, figure out what's going on to make sure that this is exactly the right program for you.
And I mean, something that really stood out for me that I'm glad that you highlighted was just the simple fact that, like, just because like work capacity changes as we age doesn't mean like mindset, attitude, output needs to change. It's just like my I work in a funny way with how I interact with people and how I position fitness for people. Because a person could think like I'll give an example. My parents are in their 70s, and one person might think, "Oh, like they're getting older. Perhaps you should be gentle with them and like careful with them and stuff." And I'm like, "No, like we are going full
Mm.
Goggins." And I like using that terminology just because it kind of like helps people to get into the mindset that like they're not dead yet.
Yeah.
Like there is so much to be had out of life. There is so much like ability to advocate for one's own quality of life. Like there's a lot of situations where a person could be in pain, and some people might be like, "Oh yeah, just get a shot for that." And it's like, no, like just adapt your life to incorporate more strength training, build muscle, prioritize like some kind of structure to your fitness, and look at ways that you can still do all the things that you were doing before in your life and adapt as needed. Like sometimes it's like maybe you won't farmer carry 2 buckets of water across like 200-meter or 200-foot distance the same way you used to, but you might still farmer carry 2 buckets of water. Or maybe it could be that you won't. do chores outside for 3 hours, but you might do chores outside for 45 minutes every single day. And by doing that, it not only helps a person from a physical standpoint, but it also like pours into their sense of purpose, and like their identity in themselves, their ability to feel like independent, their ability to feel like they have like a pivotal role in like the basically all of their social connections. Like for someone who is over 40, over 50, that is capable of helping their loved ones, that is capable of doing kind things for people in their life, like that's huge. And so any way that fitness can help them with that is going to not only help them stay physically healthy, but also like mentally healthy too. Because if a person all of a sudden kind of feels, I gotta dial it back, I gotta be gentle with myself. And then somebody's like, oh, can you help me carry the groceries? And like, nah, I gotta be gentle with myself. Like that impacts them in a way that really snowballs.
Yep.
Whereas if they're like, no, like I just have to adapt. Like I got this injury, I just have to adapt. I can still train in this way. I can still be consistent with my movement, prioritize my protein, stuff like that. And I am like to give a person like an identity where it's like I am unstoppable. Like that's pretty
Yep.
cool to give to somebody when they're in like when they're of a senior's age. And it's like I haven't died yet. Got to keep going. And like that's my favorite thing. Like I have a uncle in his 90s and he still lives on his farm. And I'm like, yeah, go uncle, go. Because it's just like I'm not going to stop him. I'm going to empower him if anything. I'm going to find little ways to insert my influence to be like, let's make sure that you keep moving. Let's make sure that if you went and you saw a physiotherapist and they gave you exercises to help with pain, that you do those exercises. Let's make sure your nutrition is in check, just so that you are able to maintain what you have based on the nutrition that you're getting. Because if a person's like just living off carbohydrates and not getting enough protein, like that can impact them, especially at an elderly age. But all that to say that I'm hoping that anybody who's listening to this that has any doubt in their mind that they are not the target audience of me saying like go get after it and be strong, like they are the target audience. Like everybody's the target audience. But
And it
as
starts with, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but like it's such an important point that the belief is the foundation of any program and any change. If you
hmm
believe it can happen, if you believe it can change, if you believe you can ski again, if you believe you can get stronger, if you believe, then you most likely can. And it works the other way. If you don't believe you will ever be out of pain, and because of that, you won't ever be able to do these things, you're also correct. And that's where
hmm
we have to start. And if I can, I will have that question on a consult with someone. Like, well, do you believe that it would be possible that you could, play pickleball again and be comfortable doing it? And if they say no, like, well, then I won't be able to help. There's nothing we could do because you don't think it can happen, and your beliefs will always lead to your actions, and your actions create your experience, and then your experience creates your state, and that's the person you are. The person who walks around with their head high and is able to say yes and understands their recovery and understands their nutrition. And it might be a long way to get there, but you have to believe it's possible. And
hmm
the other side of that is something you referenced, and it's people if they're having a hard time in life, if they're worried about doing something, if they're in pain, maybe they're a postpartum mom, maybe they just feel like they need to be a little careful because they're really fragile. Those are the people who need training the most because ideally, training is the hardest thing we do. That's why we train. We want this to be, a little bit of a controlled environment where we challenge you, we push the edges, we take you right up to the edges of your capability and what you could possibly recover from, what you could possibly do. Ideally, the training is the hardest thing you ever do, and then you go out and experience life. But if life is the hardest thing you ever do, then that's where you're going to break because it's also less controlled, and your world will get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller because you'll be worried. But if we can demonstrate, I've taken what we probably call older people and had them practice falling down all the time. Hey, this is going to come up. We have to learn how to fall. We have to learn how to get back up off the ground. At some point, you will end up on the ground alone, and this can't. We aren't going to let it be a catastrophe. And maybe that takes weeks or months or something like that. But this should be the hard, uncomfortable, the same thing getting out of pain. Getting out of pain requires a bunch of irritation and being uncomfortable. You are going to do a bunch of movements that hurt. Now, there's rules and there's very strict guidelines around how much it's allowed to hurt and the kind of recovery we're looking for and things like that. Because, but in order to adapt, we need to irritate things. We need to get pretty uncomfortable, and being uncomfortable sucks, which is why people avoid it. But if you
Hmm.
avoid it, everything gets smaller and everything gets harder, and suddenly you're Justin who has to crawl out of a hole he dug for a year and a half because he didn't want to do the work, the first 2 months.
Absolutely. And I mean, something that I want to point out in this discussion that we're having is like, it's a good podcast when like there's so much energy on both ends that we both have things to rally off of. And
Yeah.
like that truly is a good sign because sometimes there's a discussion and it's like the next person doesn't know what to say because they just don't have enough like emotion on like that topic. But we're both like this is something that people will have a lot of takeaways on, and something that I wanted to highlight that you said. See, this is the thing. We keep saying stuff and
Yep.
just echoing each other. But what you said that I've experienced people feeling opposite of this, so that's why I want to repeat it again, is that when it comes to training and life, your training should be more difficult than just life by default. And that is just something so important for people to hear in different ways, for it to be reframed in ways that more people can relate to it. Um, some of the ways that I've framed it in my own life experiences is just the impact that jujitsu has. And I'll also open this up to more people so more people can relate because I have experience in being passionate about spin classes. I used to go to a whole bunch. I'd go to like 8 to 9 classes a week. I instructed for a year. I was super intense about it. I was going to a cycle bar location where they had the leaderboard, and I always wanted to be at the top. And I generally was. And it was just like that was like my whole identity. But because I put so much of myself into it, it benefited me in ways with my mental health because I just dumped everything into that. I like just I would have sacrificed myself to be the very, very best of myself at that. Now going into the jujitsu ecosystem, where I find that to be great is because I don't have a choice whether I'm going to shut everything off or not. It is just the default. You go in there and somebody is applying very advanced techniques that take them years to even comprehend. And they are just laying those out on you, and you have no choice but to learn. Because if you do not learn, you will just be submitted over and over and over and over. And even if a person is okay with that, it still comes with a cost. If not injury, exhaustion. Like to be submitted over and over and over has a very high level of fatigue where a person's like, I can't even like think because I am just
Yep.
so tired. Where you'll see somebody coming for like some of their first classes, and I'll say I've done this myself. I think it was like probably the second class that I went to. I did one roll and I tapped out of exhaustion and I sat on the bench for the rest and I left like 15 minutes early because I was like, I don't know what else I am capable of doing. I think that is all I have for today. And then after that period of time, then I realized like I had to apply more of myself and like time would pass by and I'd realize like there's aspects of my technique and my effort that were like complacent where it's like am I really bringing my best to this? Am I really like hearing like the coaching cues that are given to me? Um, but in this, learning to really apply something in yourself into something aside from just the general things that up in life is so essential to your quality of life, so essential to your human experience, especially as social media escalates in like taking up space in our minds. Like if we think about our lives before Instagram and Facebook existed, fortunately, we both can reflect to a time when that was the case because there's a lot of people in the industry who do not know life without that.
I know.
But if we think back to that, just how much more simple our thought processes were, and how much less we thought about things that we now think about maybe more than we realize. Like if somebody that you and I both know makes a social media post, or if somebody that you and I both know has like a controversial interview with somebody on a podcast, like in the before times, wouldn't have taken up any space in our mind. It wouldn't
Yep.
have impacted us in the way that it does now. Now it can wreck our day. Now it can change our decisions in like what direction we go in the next year, or it can change how we see ourselves. And that stuff has such a huge impact. So to be able to take kind of our power back, we lean into our fitness modality of choice, but we not only just do it complacently, but we do it with intention and we do it with intensity. And perhaps we find a little level of competition to bring out the best in ourselves, not to one up somebody else, but to one up ourselves so that we're actually looking at what we used to do and trying to do better than that. And so it's just if somebody is feeling like they needed to get more out of their fitness journey, what I would say is just like look for a way to get your next personal best or look for a way to like have an end goal. Like for myself, I sign up for competitions in jiu-jitsu because I know that it's going to reveal some of the things that I need to work on. It's going to keep me honest with like which weight class I'm in.
Hmm.
As time goes on, I have to be in a lower weight class because it's just not strategic for me to go against people who are like a foot taller than me.
Right.
And it's just like there's so many layers to what you can get from it. But I'm gonna throw you a giant curveball and have you like really think about different things, topic and subject matter wise. If we were to go back like 20 years in your life, where would that place you? And I'm just pulling a random number based on a few figures that you've given me, but like, where would that place you? What was your life like? What kind of decisions were you making?
20 years ago was very, very different. I was 7 months into dating my now wife. I was working as a stagehand in New York City, mostly on Broadway, traveling around the country, putting up, doing lighting for giant industrial live events, TV shows, things like that. And I think I was just about to get a little bit hurt at work and start going on the internet trying to find exercises that would make you be stronger at work. Like it was literally a Google, it might not even been Google, it could have been a Hey Jeeves search for all I know. But that kind of idea of like, I didn't really care about fitness that much. I'd always been like kind of in shape and I would run and do push-ups and like it was fine. I was fine. I was unremarkable, but I was fine. I was like strong amongst my friends. But I started getting hurt at work. And I was like, well, this isn't I'm way too young. And this is I'm at that point I was like, well, I'm gonna be doing this for the rest of my life. And part of that career is picking up very heavy lights and very heavy cables and things like that. So what can I do to make sure that I don't get hurt here as much? And that led me down the rabbit hole that brought me to where I am today.
Hmm. If we unpack like how you perceived yourself and maybe some of your limiting beliefs, or maybe just like kind of just how you reflected on life. Like if you were to describe yourself in a letter back then and you describe yourself in a letter now, how would that differentiate? How would those two letters look differently?
It was, I don't know that would be massively different. It was a very different life because the schedule was so crazy. And I was still, it's a very fast moving freelance atmosphere, meaning that it was totally normal to get a call at 8 p.m. Like, hey, cue him to work at 6 a.m. And if, unless I was already working somewhere else at 6 a.m., the answer is always yes. Like I'll say yes to every job because that's how you meet people. It was also a lot of going out to bars after work because that's where most of the next jobs came from. Like it turned out, I don't know if it's still this way in the industry, but it was then all of the real decisions and all of the real networking were soaked in alcohol. And that made it tough. That made it tough to sleep enough and recover enough. And I suspect it contributed to, getting hurt at a younger age because I was under recovered and like really pushing my capacity and things like that. So a lot of that has changed. Something that has carried through is already then I was usually in charge. So I was in charge of crews. I had people I loved working with. I would get sent, to Las Vegas and be put in charge of 50 guys I had never met before. And really, really early on, I found that being a leader who could bring people together and then stand at the front and kind of defend them was really important to me. So if, you know, management was trying to lower someone's rate or cut the crew in half or do something that I thought was unnecessary or even harmful to the job, I would do almost anything to make sure it didn't happen. And that same belief carries through to, if I have a client and there's a hole in the program that isn't working, I will do anything to fix it, including referring them to someone else entirely. Like, hey, this isn't, you need someone who can do A, B, and C at this level, and I'm not that guy, at
Mm-hmm.
least not yet. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a friend. I know some really cool people. May I introduce you to this friend? I think you should work with them for at least till a while, maybe forever. I don't know. But this is the right solution for you, even if that hurts me. And certainly there were times in, working in New York where I took a stand and it ended up kind of biting me in the butt. And this company didn't want to hire me again, but I knew I'd done the right thing. And then 5 years later, a bunch of those crew people were actually in charge of studios and things like that. And they remembered the kind of person I was. And that carried through. So it was a radically different, day to day. But I think a lot of the kind of guiding beliefs have carried through.
Yeah, I like that. And that gives me more material to put you onto a little bit more of a sidebar, just to almost like get more specific on things that I think would help people who are trying to reach their goals more on a professional level, but it can
Yeah.
also be goals on a personal level. I'm gonna set this up with some of my own personal experiences just to kind of like um, share with you some of my insights. So
Thank you.
what I have found historically to be helpful for me is connecting with people.
Mhm.
And a lot of the time, because of the nature of social media, people don't understand what I mean by connecting with people, and they almost will, it'll get to a point where it's almost like my version of connection is discredited, like it doesn't count because it's not all visible. And so to add light to this, like the number of walk and talks that I have done over the course of 8 years is insane. And I have also published some of them within my podcast, but a lot of them are completely offline. Some of these walk and talks, I really, from an objective point of view, I had nothing visible to gain from this interaction. Like I wasn't walking and talking with somebody because I thought that they could do something for me. It wasn't for any kind of like trying to get them to like me or anything. I just thought I know nothing about this person. I have an opportunity to learn about them. There may be a chance that I could help them with something, or there may be a chance that they might teach me something that I didn't know. And in most cases, that was true. And so it helped with like my soft skills, my communication skills, my confidence. It helped with all these things. But then on top of that, the number of times that I've found myself um leveraging real life connections, like whether it be like retail jobs that I've worked, where I built rapport with a lot of people, not only like colleagues, but customers that came through. Or like I have connections with people that I worked with in retail like 15 years ago. Like I've put them on my podcast. Even though we don't work together, there's very little correlation. I was able to see the value and what they contributed to my life back then. And then also just like going to things that are new by yourself, that are in real life, that has contributed to my career in big ways. An example being just last evening. I'm part of like it's kind of like an underground investor group in a way. Because it's like it's not a franchise group. It's not, there's no like is very low barrier to entry.
Okay.
But we basically do seminars and we learn about budgeting, we learn about investing, we learn about small business ownership, we learn about international business. We have opportunities to participate in different projects happening internationally. And a lot of people are like, I don't know what that is, so I'm not going to do it, or I think it's a scam, so I'm not going to go. But I had the willingness to be like, I'm going to figure it out. And I did. And it helped with my knowledge around like financial literacy. It helped with my ability to plan for future me. It gave me opportunities to invest in things like a condo in where is Dominican Republic? I always get it mixed up
Mhm.
with all the other tropical places. But like this is what connecting with people in real life can do. And there's a lot of people who will be like, "Oh, well, I'm not where I want to be." And it's like, "Have you left your house?" And I've had that position to me before. I've had people that I look up to remind me to just get off the internet and go meet people. Now with that said, I know that you are someone who has experience with this because you've talked about it already, just with like the connections that you would make. And despite the fact that a lot of them may have been like boozy connections, they were connections nonetheless. So in present day, how have you been connecting with people to grow personally, professionally, etc.? Like, what are your favorite ways to connect with people now?
I love I love doing the podcast, right? I bring people on all the time, very frequently. My joke about the podcast is a really interesting person won't meet me for coffee for an hour and a half, but if I promise to record it and publish it, then they will. Like,
Yeah,
oh yeah, I'll turn the mic on. I just want to
yeah,
chat. I want to dig into your life so badly. And if I promise to record it and publish it, you're down. Great. And I do all the publicity things and make sure it gets out there and all that stuff. But that's really I just want to have the conversation. And I think that that genuine curiosity, which is kind of like some of what you're describing, that's a real value for me, is like being a lifelong learner and being really curious and being willing to be the dumbest guy in the room, right? Like I'm going to a coaching conference this year that I know almost everyone is a nutrition coach. A lot of them are trying to do something that's different than me, but a bunch of them are cool. And there's some really cool people speaking. I'm going to stick out a little bit and be a little bit weird. And I'm totally down to be legitimately weird and a little uncomfortable because I think I'm going to learn something. I love going into
yeah,
small coaching groups. I love bringing people on. I mentor coaches all the time for free.
yeah,
They call me up and like, hey, I heard you did, I saw this company advertised a thing, you made this money, you had this thing or whatever. Do you have any tips? It's like, well, I can't give you like three tips. That's the hackiest thing in the world. Why don't we like get
yeah,
on a call for 30 or 45 minutes? Tell me about what you think you're doing. And maybe I'll say, I can't help you get where you want to go. Like if your thing is, scaling a template business for thousands and thousands of followers, it's not me. But I think I can tell you two or three people who are really good at that. If I wanted to do that, those are the people I would be listening to and
yeah.
kind of help them in that way. So the more I expose myself and be a little bit vulnerable and willing to be kind of the dumb guy and learn for a while, that those are always the times when I genuinely grow and meet more cool, interesting people. And then 6 years down the line, I'm like, oh, I should really call Herrick. He's the perfect person for this. And
Yeah.
and I know, by the way, because we've been pleasant over the years, he'll pick up the phone when I call.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. That's something that when you said being willing to be the dumbest person in the room, like that has been my like mission for
It's
most of
so
my
fun,
career.
right? Like, and
Yeah.
people get it in the gym. Like, if you're the strongest person in your gym, you probably need a new gym
Yeah.
because it's unlikely you're going to be challenged. I've seen it even in like let's make it easy, powerlifting. I have so many people have like come to me as the strongest person in their gym, and they have whatever. It's a young woman with a 300-pound squat, which is pretty impressive for a person their size, their age, etc. But they hang out with women who are doing 350 for reps on a regular basis. Boom, suddenly their progress has jet fuel added to it because their mindset has been expanded. Their idea of what's possible has grown. And they start taking maybe not everything, but oh, this person like really takes their recovery seriously. Maybe I
Yeah.
should take my recovery a little bit seriously. And they start taking these little bits, and that makes them more successful. We're not cloning people, but we're taking the best elements out of all of these experiences to improve one person.
I like that. So I have another hard-hitting question for you. Over the last 2 years, can you identify something substantial that you've changed your mind on? Or just like maybe you used to go on like big, long TED Talks on a certain topic, but now your TED Talk sounds different because of just new information that was presented to you.
There's a lot of things. I deliberately, I'm always open to having my mind changed about pretty much anything, especially in health and fitness. One of the things that I've changed a bit is my approach to bodybuilding and body composition, and like the amount of people who can really benefit by truly going to failure sometimes on some exercises, on some days, is way bigger than I used to think it was. I used to think that some of that training was really only for people who uh you know could definitely handle that intensity and were super healthy and kind of fed on that kind of intensity. I now will, I this as at time of recording 2 hours ago, I took a postpartum mom to absolute failure on several upper body exercises, and she was gasping and sweating, and her heart rate was 165, and she's seeing better results than she had in years with other people. And I don't know if I would have had the open mindedness to have that approach even a couple of years ago.
Hmm. That is a good one. Like I can't emphasize enough because it's just sometimes we'll get stuck in our ways and we'll just be like, this is the way I've always done it, this is the way I will do it. And we don't know what we don't know. And so the willingness to learn what we don't know, like to find out what is the actual best outcome, best interest of that individual is priceless. And so because you shared with me, I'll share with you. And this has been fun for me in being able to find out things firsthand, just kind of like doing little experiments. So most of my experiments have been around walking. And I've had different like phases of how I was going to introduce walking. The first phase was I got my walking treadmill and I would just walk on my treadmill while I was doing work, and I would see how that impact quality of life, or see how it impacted like maybe my goals with cutting weight for jujitsu, or just seeing how it impacted my mobility or mental health. And it was kind of like hit and miss, because it was just my ability to have buy-in towards doing the walking treadmill, and just like the viability of the walking treadmill wasn't always there. That was just a
Mhm.
reality. Like sometimes it would be like, I'm tired of just walking in the same spot of my place all the time, just for the sake of walking. And so it wasn't something that I could honestly say that I could reach a certain level of consistency with, because there just wasn't the frameworks in place that I needed to just make that happen. That's just a reality of working with people.
And you
Um,
probably didn't believe it was going to take you where you wanted to go. Because
well,
even if it was a little boring or not fun, but if you're like, this is definitely the thing that is going to transform my rolling, you probably would have done it. But something about it wasn't lining up, at least enough.
I'll give you some more context, kind of help with painting the full picture, because there was another example that I almost forgot to include. During the pandemic, it was like a 6-month contract with one of the Lululemon stores, and we were promoting the Lululemon Mirror, their like virtual
Oh, yeah.
workout platform
Mhm.
thing. And during that time, I did a social experiment on myself, or I guess just an experiment. It wasn't so much social, but I would park as far away from the opposite entrance of the store as possible. And this was when I was really like, I have this thing where like people park far away and they tag me on Instagram, and I call it the Park Far Away Club. But I had this thing where I was like putting a lot of social media posts up in my story where I'd like be parking far away from grocery stores, parking far away in the mall. But I like went out of my way to park as far away from that store's entrance as I could. And knowing that I would have these regularly scheduled shifts about 5 days a week, then I knew that I would accumulate a fair volume of just like sort of passive walking. And in doing that, and then just like making laps around the store throughout the day, I accumulated a lot of walking, and like it worked. I think I lost like 20 pounds over that period of time. And I also put another like constraint in place that every single lunch that I would have at that contract would be a salad. And I would hit my protein goal by prepping like chicken or salmon or beef or whatever. And I'd just add that to like the romaine lettuce or to the spinach leaves. And I'd add some like peppers and stuff like that to just like add some volume to it and add some nutrition to it. But by having those two rules where I always parked far away, and I always had a salad for lunch. It didn't matter what I had outside of that. I had that framework in place and that worked. Then I did the walking treadmill at home, but I was working remotely. And so it was like I didn't so much have like a reason to do the things. I didn't have as much buy-in because it was okay, well, like I don't need to do this. I could just sit down. Or it could be like, well, I don't need to walk for an hour because I'm already where I need to be. I could walk for like 2 minutes. And so then that brought me to my next sort of social experiment where for the longest time, and I'm based in Edmonton, Alberta. So
Mhm.
sometimes we have just terrible weather where it's really snowy and it feels like it's like we're in a cold, barren wasteland. And so I would be under the impression that the city wasn't walkable. And I would for the longest time, I would drive like 15 minutes to a park and then I walk around that park. And I felt that that was how I could make it walkable. I'd have to get in the car and walk to a destination or drive to a destination to walk. And then I did a trip to Denmark this past May. And I was just so impressed with just how active everybody was and how I could just walk everywhere. And I was like, wow, this is so much more walkable. And I was like talking shit about like the streets in Edmonton because I was like, this isn't walkable. Like Denmark's walkable. And then I got back home and I was gonna do like a solo episode about this, just like really illustrating the differences. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna like make change because like we're gonna make this city walkable. But then I was like, have I tried walking into like the essential things? Like, have I actually given it an honest effort? And then I did it. And I was like, first, I'm going to walk to, like, I have a membership for one of the Planet Fitness gyms. Well, I guess all of them
Mhm.
because it's a black membership. But nonetheless, I was like, I'm going to see A, if I can walk to this
Mhm.
location, and B, if it's walkable. Like, because you can walk anywhere. You might have to jump some fences and like walk in some ditches. But like, if it has sidewalk from like your door to their door, then I'd say it's walkable. And it was.
Yeah.
It was actually pretty pleasant. Like it was a really nice walk. It was better than the walk where I would used to drive then walk. This was
Mhm.
better than that. And I was like, all right, well, that's good. But like, what about everything else that I need? So I was like, how about groceries? Can I walk to the grocery store? And like one of the grocery stores is like connected to that Planet Fitness. So that was an easy one. So I was like, let's dial it up a notch. Let's see how many grocery stores I can walk to. So then I walked to one that was like north of me and it was like really pleasant walk, really calming. Actually, not that far of a distance. Like, okay, it's walkable. And then I would have like these coffee walk and talks, and I was like, I wonder if I can walk to the coffee walk and talk, and I did. And the funny thing here is, then I started to realize like how much capacity that we have, because I was having days where I was getting like 33,000 steps in the day. Because I'd like walk to the walk and talk, and then I'd walk and talk, and then I'd walk back from the walk and talk. And then I'd
Yeah.
go on another walk later because I had to get groceries. And it was just like these insights got me more positioned to help people in more ways because then I understood like if you suggest walking treadmill to everybody, it's not going to work on everybody.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you have to give a person a sense of purpose to do the thing that you're suggesting. So for me, the sense of purpose in walking to the grocery store is when I get there, I have something to do. Or the sense of purpose in walking to the walk and talk is I'm walking so I can connect with somebody that in some way, shape, or form is going to fill some bucket for me. Sometimes it's like the bucket where you're mentoring somebody for free. Sometimes it is the bucket where you are connecting with a friend that you really care about. And sometimes it is just like being around another human being and getting to know them for the very first
Yeah.
time, understanding their story, all that stuff. So it just kind of gave me more depth as a coach and more understanding that, like, if I think something is the case, I better be willing to try it. Like, if I'm going to make some bold claim, I have to be out there getting my hands dirty and actually like proving it right or proving it wrong. And it's like I had done some walking experience experiments in the past. Like I would go and I get my tires changed, and then instead of taking like the courtesy ride home, I'd walk home.
Sure.
But I looked at that as like an extreme measure. And then I was starting to like look at the data of it all. Like I didn't have
Mhm.
I had a Fitbit for a bit, but then it got discontinued, so I got an Apple Watch so I could kind of closely watch like heart rate, and closely watch like steps. And although it
Hmm.
might not be the most scientific device, like there are things that have more accuracy or whatever, it was something that I could see trends.
Yeah.
Like if I'm walking more tomorrow than I am today, I can see that. Even if like the steps may not be like accurate to real life, like even if it's off by 100 steps or something.
Hmm.
But I could start to see like, okay, to get the ideal quality of life, I need to hit this marker. And over the past 6 months, I've hit a marker of 50% of that. And so then I could see, okay, it feels outlandish to walk home from getting your tires changed and then walk back to pick up your car, like when they're done with your car. But that is like the baseline for ideal quality of life. Because if I missed on that, then I would be leaving opportunity on the table, very similar to the experience that you had with a client who you might have initially hesitated to push. And then you decided to push that client a little bit. And then they got the actual outcome that, like, these people come to us to feel amazing. But all that said, I don't want to like ramble when you are the guest. So I would be curious to know what is one person that has influenced you in a way that kind of like makes you think, like whether it be like a mentor, whether it be like
Yeah.
somebody in your life, etc.
I have a so the first person who hired me to be like a full-time coach. And they hired me to be part-time, but one of the deals was I had to come to the weekly coaches meeting, which was in the middle of the day on a Wednesday. And that was a turning point for me. It was like, well, if I accept this, that means I can't take any work. I was still doing some stagehand stuff at the time. It's like I can't do any work that's going to go over that Wednesday, which doesn't only mean I have to say no to daytime work on Wednesdays, but a lot of times you get hired for this job and it's 4 days and it's Monday through Thursday or Tuesday through Friday or Wednesday through Saturday. And I have to say no to all of those in order to take this part-time job, in order to come to this meeting. And those meetings were incredible. I mean, I know I've been in lots of terrible staff meetings in my life and lots of useless meetings. These were overwhelmingly great. She brought education. There were tests. There was homework. She was so committed to making the coaching staff better and being part of that and having being taken really seriously. Like, no, we're not just like playing the radio and getting people sweaty and sending them home. Like we are serving each individual person. We're going to learn so much about them and do these education. And we're going to get pushed to take continuing education courses and pushed to, really challenge beliefs even in what is happening in the gym and ask each other hard questions about why we're doing certain things with certain people. And is this the right way? And is this how we want to behave? And is this how we want to even represent ourselves? And she is now a colleague. She's a physical therapist. She sold the gym, went to PT school, is now a great physical therapist who also coaches people. And I've been able to mentor her doing some online work and kind of best practices and setting up systems. And I think without her, I probably wouldn't be where I am because that idea of how important a coach can be and how professional a coach should be was a big influence early on that really influenced my thinking about the right way to go about this. And this isn't just a hobby, and this isn't just, I'm a personal trainer and people stop listening. It's not just something you do in your 20s. This can be a absolutely life-changing pursuit where you not only lift people up, but by doing that, make all the people around them better. So you have this ongoing positive social influence where your client is the drop in the bucket, and then it ripples out and affects their family and their friends and their community. And all of those people are made better. And by the way, you should be able to make a living doing this. This shouldn't be something that is always a side hustle and it's really hard to get education and those sorts of things. And that combination was put in place really early on, and I'm forever grateful for it.
That you kind of took me through a time machine because I was listening to that and there was like pieces of my career that I relate to. Like the first gym that hired me, um, there were kind of like practical meetings where like for an hour at noon on certain days, we would get together with one of the more experienced trainers, and then they would kind of like share with us some of the information that they knew. And we go through different movement drills, and we just get more on the floor experience as we were building up our client roster. And that is just like a part of my career that I've never taken for granted, but I've never thought about some of the sacrifices I had to make. It was just, I had this blind faith that it was going to work for me. I had this blind faith that I was going to get a full client roster because I was showing up to the things that I need to show up to. But because of this, like it was, I took on so much more risk because I was just unwilling to do anything in the opposite direction. I was unwilling to compromise and go and just find like a day job to make up the difference. um, I did work at a bar during the weekends and stuff, but that wasn't, it's not like that solved all the problems. I still needed to like push and get more clients. And like when that gym closed, I had nowhere near the amount of clients that I needed to be viable working there and the
Yeah.
bar, and especially not to be viable just working there. And I was the only individual on staff that was in that compromised position. And because of that, I felt a lot of like just motivation to just prove everybody wrong. I had this chip on my shoulder. I was like, I'm going to make a name for myself. I'm not going to be like just completely eliminated from this industry because of what happened to me. I'm going to just like earn my place here. But having said that, I would put so much weight on that part of the journey that I would forget about how instrumental those little like seminars were, just like those little like sessions where somebody who knew more than me would take time to teach me what they knew, whether what they knew was what they and myself do now in our careers. I'll give a shout out. Anthony Harder helped me a lot with like developing a lot of my skills, and him and Dean Guido both worked at me at the same private gym. But Anthony Harder would lead like these sessions where he would teach what he knew. And like as time has got on and we've both learned new things, we've changed our mind on a lot of the ways that we run sessions or the modalities that we use. But it's undeniable that like those sessions got me into the right mindset, probably made me hungrier to learn because I realized what learning looked like. I realized like you do have to like try things for yourself, and you do have to have another coach cue you. And it gave me the motivation to like when there's a session that comes up that it's like it's in person, it's practical, and it's with somebody that you've learned from like online or in a book. Put your money where your mouth is, invest in
Yep.
them, and get to experience from them in person. Because like I would subscribe to Dr. Pat Davidson's Power Hour, and I was
Mhm.
subscribed to that from like probably 2017 or 2018 until like I don't know when they stopped or something like that. I don't even remember unsubscribing. Maybe I did. But then he came to Edmonton, and it was like an instant reaction. It was like probably pricier than your average seminar, but I was like, I don't care what it costs. I'm going. And it was just like I actually got to be cued by Dr. Pat Davidson. And it was like that insight was deeply valuable. Even if I could have figured it out myself, it was well worth the price of admission. And like I would apply that to all kinds of people. Like sometimes you luck out and you go to a conference where they're doing practical stuff there, and they're just picking people from the audience. Like I've been to some where Lee Boyce has done like a presentation, and like there's been some where he's speaking, and then some where it's very practical based, where he's moving people through different like movement examples, etc. And if you put your hand up and you're the volunteer, you're going to get an opportunity. But if you don't show up to the thing, you're not going to get that chance because you're not in the room and you don't get to put up your hand. So
That
this
is,
is
being in
just,
the room is such a different and potentially huge experience, even if, because I've done so many of the things you're talking about, like, oh,
yeah,
I've been following this person for years, or I've read their book, or I even like I took their certification and now they're coming. Yeah, I'm going. And
yeah,
even if, and there's a danger here for people listening, even if you're like, well, he's just doing like the talk version of this thing in his book. I've read his book. I'm not going to learn anything. One, you're probably wrong because they're going to
yeah,
say it in a different way, or you're going to hear it in something else. And a human being's going to be there. So you
yeah,
can reach out ahead of time. and be like, hey, I'm coming to your thing. You're an inspiration. I have one question I'd love to ask you in person. If we get a chance, that would be amazing. And maybe they read it and maybe they don't, and they're not going to respond to you. But then you can come up afterward or before, or buy the VIP tickets. You can get backstage and talk to people. Be like, hey, you probably don't remember this, but I really want to ask you a question. Do you have a moment? And 90 times out of 100, they'll say, yeah, go ahead. What do you got? And now you can really get into it. And by the by, then you can reach out to that person afterwards and say thank you. And maybe they say thank you back. Or maybe they follow you. Or maybe you get an email. Or maybe you get like, this could be the moment that changes your life because you're
Yeah.
connecting with a person that you look up to, and they're all human beings. I've met so many cool, super famous people, and overwhelmingly, they're just folks.
Yep.
And they're also interested. And they started at the bottom, and they have been scared and poor and had imposter syndrome. And they may have been terrified to go up on the stage you just saw them on because they felt like they weren't having a good day or something. Like, and you can connect with these people as people in a way that you will never be able to do through a screen.
Absolutely. And I can speak to the nervousness people feel when they go up on stage because I helped with we have a fitness conference that takes place up here in Edmonton. And I'll help with like some of the production. So I'm often the one miking people up. And like
Mm-hmm.
people with like decades of experience, they still get nervous. I'm usually the one being like the care bear and be like, you can do it. But it's just
Yep.
like everybody is human. But I want to be respectful of your time. And then we'll also just quickly banter off the line.
Mm,
So don't hang up after we stop the recording.
I won't.
But first and foremost, where can people find you? Do I direct them to your social media? Do you have other resources that you wanted to share?
The best place to go is Instagram. It's at Feel Strong Fit, and you can link everything from there. You can get a really good idea of the kind of stuff I do. I answer every single DM. Go ahead. I dare you. Try and send a DM that I won't respond to. It doesn't happen. You can get to the website through there. Everything else is on Instagram.
That's perfect. And then with that said, like I'm sure there will be more of these episodes between the two of us in the future. But I just wanted to thank you so much for being on the show today, Justin.
This was great. I really appreciate it.